Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, checking in from North Carolina, and today I'm joined by my fellow members of the Coaster101 team, Eric Woolley, who's out in California.
Hey Andrew, how's it going?
It's going well, Eric. Hope you're doing well. And I'm also joined by our New England correspondent, Shane Joseph.
Hey everyone.
So today is actually a very notable day in Coaster101 history. Not only are we launching our first ever podcast, we're also celebrating the 15th anniversary of Coaster101.com. On June 15th, 2005, we made our debut on the internet. The first Coaster101 post was written, and I'm going to let Eric read it in its entirety.
Welcome to Coaster101, your place to find out what's happening in the coaster industry, and much more.
And now, 15 years later, after that post, we have a podcast. So, I mean, I've been writing for the website since 2013, and I know Eric came on not too long after that, right, Eric?
I think it was late 2014, although I actually don't remember exactly, but that feels right. We should make it clear that first post was written by Coaster101's founder, John Stevenson, who is not with us today, but does still write for the website. He's gotten more elaborate with his writing style than he was back then.
And then Shane, you're one of our newest writers. You've been on for about a year now?
Yeah, I think so, about a year. I was looking the other day. I think it was May 31st of last year that I made my first post, so 2019.
Perfect.
So to celebrate our 15th anniversary, we've posted an article a day for the past 15 days that highlights some of our Coaster101 favorites, including interviews, rides, and articles. And today we're going to talk about some of our favorite roller coasters and attractions that have opened in the last 15 years. So we're going to start off with steel coasters. Andrew, you go first.
For me, there's one answer to this question, and it feels
I bet I know the answer.
You do. You absolutely do. It's a bit of a homer pick for me, but at my home park of Carowinds, there is the B&M Behemoth, the Giga Coaster Fury 325. It opened in 2015, is the world's tallest, fastest, longest, or at least was when it opened. I don't want to have the exact stats in front of me, but Fury to me has a little bit of everything. It's got the speed, it's got the airtime, it's got the insane treble clef turnaround at the front of the park. It is a beautiful ride to look at, a beautiful ride to photograph, and I don't think there's a better roller coaster on the planet than Fury 325.
Andrew, do you remember what your I know that you've had Fury as your favorite roller coaster basically since it opened. Do you remember what you would have said your favorite was before it existed?
Yeah, I think it would have been Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. You know, I love a good B&M hyper. I love, the speed, the airtime. I love the open clamshell restraint. So it was Apollo's Chariot for a long time. And then I rode Fury, and I remember riding Apollo's Chariot that summer after Fury opened. And I was like, Fury is on a completely new, whole nother level than Apollo's Chariot.
Yeah, I think it's Fury is. I mean, it was high on my list as well. I don't remember if it was my top steel coaster or not, but it was certainly like top 3. I think it stood out to me the first time I wrote it of how it seemed to have things that were different than a lot of the B&M hypers. Like a lot of B&M hypers, they're all fun, but lots of them have very similar layouts and sort of similar. It's basically big hills, lots of airtime hills, big out and back kind of design. Right. Fury had a few things that sort of elevated it to another. The treble clef turn, I think, is probably the most obvious of those, which I thank you for going with you in my first time writing it and telling us exactly where to sit on it to get the most.
Remind me, I can't recall exactly. Did you get a seat in the spot on the back row on the left side?
I believe so. I would have to go back and actually check our actual write-up about it from when we had our Coaster101 meetup there, but I'm pretty sure that we wrote it enough that we sort of got to make sure everyone got that back left spot.
Well, Shane, I don't want to exclude you. I know you haven't been to Carowinds yet.
Have not been yet. Been trying to go for the past couple of years.
I will gladly play host when you want to come down.
But I'll definitely,
Yeah. What about you, Shane? What's your favorite steel coaster of the last 15 years?
So my favorite is Sky Rush at Hershey Park. Now, this is a pretty controversial pick just because a lot of people love to complain about the restraints on Sky Rush and how they crush your legs. I have not had a problem with it, maybe because Superman the Ride is at my home park at Six Flags, so I'm used to rides destroying your knees, but Sky Rush, to me, the restraint is not even in your mind when you're on this ride because the airtime is absolutely ridiculous. It's like no other airtime I've ever seen. And even like right off the first drop, because you have that cable lift hill, so you're already have some speed before the ride has even begun. And then you have that moment about halfway down the first drop when it goes from floater airtime to ejector airtime, and it stays ejector for the rest of the ride. Just some of the strongest ejector I felt. Me personally, I like rides that are fast and have good airtime. So for me, Sky Rush is the perfect mix of those two things. I've not ridden a coaster that combines those two better.
Eric, I know you've ridden Sky Rush. Do you agree with Shane's assessment?
Yeah, I rode it for the first time in 2018, I think. And it was, I had been warned by many people of like, oh, these restraints are awful and so painful. I don't remember actually thinking them were that bad. It may have been my expectations had just been like lowered so much that it was like, oh, I'm expecting this to be bad. But I don't think I had any more bruises on my legs than I get from any RMC coaster restraint. Like, it's not like those are comfortable and don't end up bruising my shins and thighs. Sky Rush was also very high on my list of like steel coasters from the last 15 years. I think it is incredibly forceful and has an exciting layout. I didn't have problems with it. I think I think it was like when I was there, I asked for advice and someone tweeted at us where to sit on it to get the best airtime, and it's similar. It's like a back row, one specific side, like this seat does it, and like noticeable difference. And I remember specifically there being a giant line for the front row on Sky Rush that I was like, I am not going to bother with that. And then like riding it in the back row in the right perfect seat was like, this is so good. Why would I bother waiting for the front row? Like, I'm just going to do that over and over again. It's also very fun to look at. Lots of good spots to take pictures of Sky Rush.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And the other thing that Hershey Park as a whole, and Sky Rush is just a good example of this, like there are so many rides that are put in there so compactly, and there's I think 4 coasters in this area that are like on top of each other. So just to see how they interact with one another and how the park was able to fit these rides in, that's another thing you might not think about. It's just how nicely these rides all fit together in that one space.
I have not been to Hershey Park yet. I've been threatening to go for multiple years, and maybe 2021 will be the year, or 2020. We'll see we'll see what happens. But Eric, what's your choice here?
So those Fury and Sky Rush are probably the two that I would have said. So I'll highlight something different. I think I would go with Maverick as the other of my obvious top 3 steel coasters from the last 15 years. I'm pure steel, not counting any hybrids. I mean, it's the only Blitz coaster I've ridden. I haven't been on Cheetah Hunt or any of the ones in Europe, but I love basically everything about it. I think it's a good example of like a coaster doesn't have to be the fastest or the tallest or have the most inversions or something to be really fun. I think like thinking back on it, it's been a few years since I was last at Cedar Point, rode it. I think I mostly just love how much it sort of stays close to the ground and interacts with the terrain. I think that's something that the sort of Blitz coaster model in particular does really well. That makes it stand out from lots of other sort of big, high-intensity modern roller coasters. So, like, I think the fact that like it sets itself apart with that, and I personally really enjoy any time a coaster does that. Like, anytime a roller coaster interacts with terrain well, has trenches or anything like that. My favorite thing on Fury, I think, is where it goes under the entry path, anything like that. And that's basically all that Maverick is. It's lots of like close to the ground trenches, sort of weaving in and out of itself, and small hills, and like lots of unexpected little maneuvers. And I think that's what sort of keeps it high on my list.
So to not to touch on current events too much, but have you seen pictures of the Jurassic Park coaster at Universal Islands of Adventure down in Orlando?
Yes, it looks very exciting.
I've seen a lot of people say Maverick 2.0, and I'm kind of hoping that's the case because I'm a lot like you. I love Maverick, and it's probably because I didn't fit on Steel Vengeance when we were at Cedar Point. But I think Maverick is honestly the best steel coaster there.
Yeah. I would have to go back and see what we actually wrote about after our Coaster101 visit to Cedar Point, but I may have actually said the same, even though I love Steel Vengeance and it was an insane coaster. I may have still put Maverick higher. So I think let's now shift our attention a little bit to wooden coasters. I personally love wooden coasters. There have been lots of good ones in the last 15 years, not quite as many as there have been steel coasters. But Shane, do you have a favorite wooden coaster that opened in the last 15 years?
Yeah, I do. And we were talking before, a lot of the wooden coasters I've been on have not opened in the past 15 years. But
Shane sticks to the classics.
There are some that I've gotten to go on. One of those is Wooden Warrior, which is in Quasi in Connecticut, and it is a Gravity Group smaller family wooden coaster.
Nice.
And I think what I was most impressed by is just I had pretty much no expectations, having not been on another Gravity Group coaster, and it's small. When you get to the park, you can see it, and it's not exactly towering like some of these other rides, but I think that was proof enough, like we were saying before, that to pack a punch, it doesn't have to be the biggest and the fastest, because the airtime that I experienced on this ride was really, really great. And the trains also, those Gravity Group trains, which it feels like there's nothing on you.
Yeah.
Yes, the Timberliners. There's no seatbelt or anything, so you're really free in there to experience all the airtime. So it was really great with the tight layout. I definitely appreciated. There's a few tunnels on there as well, so definitely blew away my expectations for sure.
Have you been on that one, Andrew?
I've not. No, those the Gravity Group kind of the family style wooden coasters. I haven't been on any of them, and I really want
me
to.
neither.
So, Kentucky Flyer comes to mind. Oscar's Wacky Taxi is another one. That's kind of that kind of in betweener. Between a kid coaster and a kind of a mega thrill coaster. There's enough there for enthusiasts where, you've got the airtime, you've got the bank turns, and obviously you've got those Timberliner trains. But, it's small enough where you've got a low height requirement. It's a good kind of first coaster, I feel like. And I really want to get to one of those parks and experience one.
Yeah, I also have not been on any of them. I remember when Rorosaurus first opened, which I think was maybe the oldest of those sort of their modern family coasters, and both how cool the trains for that looked, but also then reading everything of this is it's a family coaster, it's small, but it's really, really fun. Being oh man, I need to get on one of those.
Eric, your choice for wooden coaster, not exactly what we'd call a family coaster, right?
No, not so much. So mine is El Toro. I did have the Voyage also very high up there. I think I would go back and forth between those two. And it's been a while since I've actually ridden El Toro, so if it's worn out at all, I can't speak to that. But the first time I went on it, I knew it was very highly rated, sort of that it was supposed to be great and that it was big and exciting, but my mind was just completely blown the first time I rode it. I think the mix of sort of how big it is, it starts with a cable lift. Shane, you talked about cable lift before. Cable lifts are always the best. That's, I think, an automatic bonus point to any roller coaster that has one. I love the fact that you can't see the first drop of El Toro from the queue or the station of El Toro. You see the second drop, which looks really big and steep, the second hill, but you can't see the first one at all. And then it's not until you're sort of going up that lift hill that you look to your left and say, oh, wait a second, that's the drop. This is much taller and much steeper than I actually thought this was going to be. This does not look like a wooden roller coaster that I'm used to. And then so then starting with that huge drop, and that has sort of a nice out and back section with lots of big airtime hills, and then kind of gets into more of a tighter, twisted airtime section in the back half where it's got a great S-bend and lots of sort of going through its structure kind of stuff. It was when I wrote it for the first time, I was it was unlike any wooden coaster that I had been on, and that sort of set a standard that there have been other wooden coasters that have sort of come close to it, but I have not I've not been on one that I've decided surpasses El Toro yet.
Right.
Have you guys earned it? Have either of you been on it yet?
No, I've not. And I think
it's
I'm
not
probably
that far from you, Shane.
No, that's what I was going to say. I think I'm probably the closest to Great Adventure, but I have been trying to plan a trip there for, I think, 3 years at this point. And it's just, the stars have never aligned. So as soon as Jersey Devil opens, as soon as it's safe to go back to the parks, I will certainly be there. Just because there's so many good things I've heard about El Toro. I can't wait to finally get to go on it.
I did ride on it. I got stapled in there, and I remember I was in the back row. I was stapled in. And I still was flying out of my seat. I feel like over the top of every hill. It was absurd, and like it was the middle of a whirlwind trip up through like the Northeast. I did Great Adventure. I did Six Flags America, and I did Dorney Park all in a 3-day span. And El Toro I just remember it just being just so intense. And not intense in a negative way, but more intense in a just feel like a bucking bronco, basically, as you're going over those hills. But yeah, it was definitely my favorite coaster at the park, for sure.
So Andrew, what's your top recent wooden coaster?
So typically, I'm a big fan of Great Coasters International, and the one that two that come to mind are White Lightning and Invader. At Fun Spot, Orlando, and Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. But I'm actually going to go with a Gravity Group coaster here. Ravine Flyer 2 up at Waldameer in Pennsylvania. I know it opened in 2008. I went up there last year kind of not really knowing anything about the park other than Ravine Flyer 2 existed. And that's just from, being a roller coaster nerd and looking on RCDB and things like that. But so I landed in Pittsburgh. I drove up to Erie. I went to Waldameer, and the first ride I went to was Ravine Flyer 2. And you can't really see a ton of the coaster layout at all from the park because it's kind of tucked in a side. It goes into a ravine. It's not just a clever name. But it's got this amazing view of Lake Erie from the lift hill. That's, almost to me rivals any view you could have at Cedar Point. And I realize we're a roller coaster podcast, and anybody who's listening right now is going to come after me with torches and pitchforks. But it did not let up. Obviously, because it's at a smaller park, the lines were pretty non-existent, even for a Friday in the middle of the summer. And you've got some great severely banked turns and great airtime, and you've got all the tunnels. It goes over the road. The only regret I have about my trip to Waldameer was not taking the road underneath the coaster so you could see kind of that back half of it. But that's when I go back, and I will go back if I can make it back to Western Pennsylvania to have a reason to go up there. But I will definitely do that just because the views of the lake were great, but I just want to see the views of the coaster. And it's fantastic.
Said like a true coaster enthusiast.
That's, I am what I am. And I don't think, neither of you guys have been up to Waldameer, right?
If not.
Okay. It is a very fun, what I would consider to be a small park. I know we did an article last year that was part of our small parks showcase for Waldameer. But they've got some classic dark rides. They've got another really good wooden roller coaster, the Comet. But Ravine Flyer 2, it is worth the drive. You're 2 hours from Pittsburgh. You're, equidistant from Buffalo and Cedar Point. So, I mean, it's worth the trip if you can get up there.
Cool. I will, on my next Kenny Wood or Cedar Point trip, I'll try and make the detour up to Waldameer.
The good thing is about Waldameer, though, it's not a pay-per-ride park, but you can go in there without paying an admission. So, I mean, you can pay your wristband.
Free?
It's not free. You can enter the park and not ride anything. You need like a wristband to ride.
Got
it. Yeah, but you can just go in and like if you just wanted to walk around the park, you park for free. You can just, as of right now,
Based on my experience at Knoebels, that wouldn't work, where I like bought a certain number of tickets because Knoebels is a paper ride. I'm thinking, all right, this is great. I'll just ride like these 6 things and then be done. And then there were no lines, so I rode them quickly and then said, dang it, I need to get more tickets.
Yeah. So you're talking about rides, Eric. Let's talk about your what about your favorite non-coaster ride of the last 15 years?
I know that you guys are going to talk about a couple that I'm big fans of. Not going to say Rise of the Resistance. I think, Andrew, you and I have both been on that on opposite coast. I think there's a very good chance that if you ask me in like 3 years, when I've been on it more than like one frantic, overwhelming time, I will probably say that. But I feel like I riding it once month and a half before a pandemic started, I'm gonna like, I think like I couldn't fully process Rise of the Resistance to actually like put it up there. It's also like, I don't know, it's half show, half attraction. There's too much going on. So I think I'm gonna go with another Disneyland ride from earlier in the 2010s, Radiator Springs Racers, which I think neither of you have been on. Same ride system as Test Track at Epcot, which I know you've ridden, Andrew. It's if you took that ride system, which is already a fun ride system, and then add all of Disney stuff to it. And even as somebody that does not care at all about Cars, was never a big fan of the first Cars movie, haven't seen any of the other Cars movies, I don't think. It's still like there are multiple moments in that ride that I just think of as being incredibly special. There's one sort of early in the ride. It's got speakers in the cars, and there's like a point where the music sort of starts to swell, and you kind of go through like a fake rock archway into this glorious view of the giant fake rock landscape that makes up Radiator Springs, with like a waterfall and a bunch of pine trees, and it just makes my neck tingle every time I go through it, where it's like, oh, it feels like an epic movie moment kind of thing as you go through it. And then it ends with a really fun race that usually I win, so that adds to it.
Well, that's all driving on your part, right? You control
exactly.
the car.
Yes. I use the single rider lines. Usually I'm actually in like the back random seat in the back corner, but I duck my head really well, so you get less drag as you're going through the
there you go.
Perfect.
I've been out to Disneyland, and I did get on Radiator
Springs.
You
have been on?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
It was a long time ago. It was like 2013.
It was like brand new then.
Yeah, I was kind of awestruck just about the whole land in general. You know, that Cars land, again, like you, not a huge fan of the Cars franchise. I have not seen any of them, honestly. I've seen maybe bits and pieces of the first one, but none of the sequels or Planes, whatever that is. But, you know, the whole Cars Land area, you know, from the Cozy Cone Motel to all of the surrounding scenery was just...
walking down that road towards the ride at the end.
Yes, it was immersive. I'm not going to say it's to the point of a Wizarding World of Harry Potter or Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but it is definitely beautiful, and I've seen it decorated for holidays. It's just it is a well done theme park land, and there's a really good e-ticket ride in it.
It is. I think it's very clear when you walk through the land and ride Radiator Springs why that was able to save California Adventure.
Yes.
So what? Let's see. What do you have, Andrew? I think you've also got maybe another Pixar-related ride.
I do. I've got two, and I'll start with the Pixar-related ride just because anytime I go to Disney's Hollywood Studios and the one trip I had to California Adventure, I have to ride Toy Story Midway Mania. I don't know if it's the competitor in me, but I cannot go to one of those parks without riding Midway Mania. I think the interactivity, the 3D, you know, you're doing the same motion for every game there, which is pulling the little ripcord, and
incredibly painful.
Yes, it is an arm workout for sure. But
it's better workout than any walk between any hotel. Just go on that ride. It's done. Don't need to use the hotel gym.
No, you know, you don't have to lift for a week. But yeah, it's I think it's everything that makes an interactive dark ride great, you kind of see there in Midway Mania, and you've got the the next level technology, or the next generation technology rather. That's kind of the 3D screen based attraction, but you've got some practical sets in there. The queue is really great.
Yeah.
But I love Midway Mania. That is fantastic. But I also have to give a really quick shout out to Falcon's Fury at Busch Gardens Tampa. It's still one of the tallest drop towers in the world. But the thing that sets Falcon's Fury apart, obviously, is you get to the top, and as you're ascending, you go into a lying flat, prone position, and you're facing straight down when you get to the top of that tower, and then obviously they release you, and gravity takes over at that point. But for a good second or so, you are staring straight down at the ground as you're falling, and it is just the most disorienting experience I've ever had in a theme park. But I love that ride. I'm a sucker for a good drop tower, and Falcon's Fury is the best drop tower I've ever been on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally agree. That was one of the, when I was planning my trip to Busch Gardens Tampa, that was something that I had absolutely no idea what to expect. And like, even in the line leading up to the ride, I was really nervous because I had not been on anything that's like that, because it's the only one of its kind. So I had no clue what to expect. But it's just so much fun, and there's nothing like getting to the top and feeling your seat tilt back, and you're just staring at the ground for a solid few seconds, not knowing when it's going to drop. And it's totally terrifying, and I loved every second of it.
Yes. And
Far
Shane,
too terrifying. Never gonna ride it.
Oh, come on, Eric. You can do it.
Nope, not a chance.
Shane, what about you? What's your favorite non-coaster attraction of the last 15 years?
My favorite non-coaster attraction is Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey at the Universal Parks. I first rode this back in 2013 when I went to Islands of Adventure. And then I rode it again this year, a couple months ago, when I went to Universal Studios Hollywood. And the rides are pretty much the same. The one in Hollywood is a little different, only because it originally had 3D. So some of the screen effects are a little different, and it's not as smooth, I think, between some of the screen parts and the practical parts. But other than those small things, it's essentially the same. And what I like most about it is how it perfectly combines practical effects and screen effects. I think that the blending in between those two and how one scene flows into the other works really well. I think it's the perfect ride system as well for the property. I think just the land as a whole works so well, and especially using that the Kuka arm bench technology works great on this ride. So I think that it's just the perfect amount of thrill where everyone can enjoy it, and it's a property that a lot of people love.
So you mentioned the magic benches. What do you think about that robot arm technology, and why isn't it used kind of more frequently?
I don't know. That's a good question, because it really maybe is just so suited to doing one specific thing that it would be difficult to adapt that to a different ride. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. As much as I would love to see it used on different rides, it would definitely have to be, it would have to fit. It would have to make sense within the context of the ride and fit into the actual ride technology. So in one sense it's good because it's special and it's unique and you can go ride it, but it's definitely a good enough technology where I would want to see it implemented on other rides.
For sure.
I think, Andrew, I know that you've been to Legoland. I think Legoland uses, so the ride vehicle, in that case, it's a arm made by a company called Kuka that it's basically an industrial robotic arm. I think Legoland has a ride that uses that as it's stationary and sort of it flings you around. At least maybe the Legoland out here does. Yeah,
I was gonna say I don't remember. I did Legoland in Orlando last year, and I do not recall that. It very well may be, but it could be also a California only thing.
But yeah, I sort of it would be fun to see them in more places. I think it's the reason that it works so well here. I think, like you mentioned, Shane, it's how it interacts with the practical effects. I think that's what always stood out to me not just the screens, but the scale of the non-screen things, like the gigantic spiders and the Whomping Willows and the Dementors are like huge and terrifying. And like, I do not like it when the giant spiders are there, even having ran it many times.
I don't do spiders.
I always sort of like lean back from them. Pretty amazing that even having ran it a bunch of times and 10 years later or whatever, that it's still like has that effect. And I don't think there is something that like has practical effects that are quite at that.
No.
Like, feel that close to you. Is that
one Dementor, like, I mean, it's feet from your face,
it's right
but
there,
it feels like inches, and it pops up out of nowhere too. So that's definitely a highlight.
While you're in the dark and basically almost upside down, it's just
yeah, exactly.
I think I think it's safe to say that Forbidden Journey sort of set a bar for a like modern dark ride / thrill attraction.
Yep. So those were some of our favorite roller coasters and attractions of the last 15 years. Be sure to check out the website, Coaster101.com. We've got a whole series of articles as part of our 15 to 15 series. That's kind of a list of our favorite 15 different things. So we've got the 15 best roller coasters. We've got the 15 non-coaster attractions. There's even a post on there, 15 of our favorite food articles over the last 15 years.
Yeah, and if you are somehow listening to this without already doing so, make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We are at Coaster101 on all of those.
And make sure to leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and send any feedback, questions, comments, or hate mail to podcast@coaster101.com.
That's it, everybody. We will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.